so time being 2:04, we will call this FTLAC meeting to order. I think we're starting with the chair's comments. And I just want to thank ODF, especially Chair Kelly and State Forest Unoccupied, for a great meeting on Tuesday. That was a great meeting. I think it went a long ways in making sure that we all are starting to get on the same page. And I mean, there was great interaction amongst a lot of the commissioners and the Board of Forestry members. And I appreciate that very much. I really do. I think this is the start of a better relationship between FTLAC and the Board of Forestry. And I'm hoping we can keep that going. So I just wanted to put that out there. I think it was great. I really do. So I'm not sure there's the agenda. Okay. So I'm not sure we need to do introductions. What does everybody think? So looking at the participants, the panelists, 17 panelists. So let's tell you what we will introduce the panelists. Wait a minute, let me take a look at the attendees. Oh, I see. So I see Casey Garrett in the attendees. Can you promote him to panelist? He's a commissioner.
Yes, Chair Yamamoto, we'll do that right now.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got 19 panelists. So I'm going to use my screen and go across and down. So I want each of you just to introduce yourselves if you could. Commissioner Banks.
Commissioner Banks, Clatsop County.
Thank you. Mike Buffo.
Mike Buffo, Senior Forest Economist, Mason, Bruce, and Gerard.
Thank you. Mark.
Mark Rasmussen from Mason, Bruce, and Gerard.
Commissioner Tucker.
Will Tucker from Lynn County, representing Lincoln, Benton, Lynn, Marion, and Polk.
Great memory. I like that. Commissioner Magruder.
Margaret Magruder, Columbia County, representing Columbia, Washington, and Clackamas.
Perfect. Michelson.
Good afternoon, Michael Wilson. I'm the State Forest Division Chief for ODF.
Thank you. Chair Kelly.
Yeah, Jim Kelly, Chair, Board of Forestry.
Thank you for being here. Mr. DiLorenzo.
John DiLorenzo, Davis Ray Tremaine, Class Council, Lynn County versus Board of Forestry.
Thank you. Cal.
Good afternoon, Cal Mukamoto, State Forester, Oregon Department of Forestry.
Thank you. Commissioner Willie.
Commissioner Jerry Willie, Washington County Commissioner, District 4.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Leanne Thompson, Clatsop County, District 5, between the ocean and the forest.
Perfect. Justin.
Justin Buttress, Policy Analyst for the State Forest Division at ODF.
Thank you for being here. Commissioner Scar.
Aaron Scar, Tillamook County Commissioner.
And you got in, that's perfect. How about that? Commissioner Garrett.
Casey Garrett, Columbia County Commissioner.
Thank you. Mallory.
Everyone, Mallory Roberts, Association of Oregon Counties Legislative Director.
Thanks for being here, Mallory. Jason.
Jason Cox, ODF, Public Affairs.
Samantha.
Samantha Hoffman, Executive Support for State Forests and Forest Resources.
Thank you for being here. And Ron. Ron Zillian? He might have stepped away from his computer. Okay, perfect. And there is a message in the chat from Jason and says, if you are an attendee and here to provide public comment, please raise your hand, use the raise your hand function and to get in the queue. Okay, perfect. So we've done introductions. So what happened to my, agenda went away. So, somebody else have an agenda? What's next on the agenda? Are we hearing from Chair Kelly?
Public comment, Chair Yamamoto. Public comment is next on your agenda.
Thank you. I had it up on the screen, but it's gone now, so I don't know. So, do we have any public comment? Thank you, Margaret, for that.
Chair, I see no one signed up for public comment.
I also see no one. Okay, so now we're going to Chair Kelly and State Forester Mukomoto. Is that correct? Perfect. Chair Kelly.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I do want to comment on one thing from our meeting the other day. You, Commissioner, and I think some others had expressed that maybe the right thing to do would really be to revamp this HCP. So I've been thinking about that and exploring, what the options are there, and really have learned that any significant change at this point means almost a start over. So, you're talking a 2 to 4 year period. And that leads me to think about the fact that the Coho lawsuit has been kind of rearing its head again. And I think if we wanted to go in that direction, the reality is we have a very high likelihood that we would have a federal judge essentially running the department, which and if that was to happen, it would be, by definition, that judge would be doing that out of concern around the Coho. And so I don't think that is something that is going to be in the best interest of the department, and certainly not in the best interest of the county. So just wanted to be thinking about that and factoring that possibility in, because we don't want to choose a situation that's the worst of both worlds. Anyhow, thought I'd throw that out there.
Well, I do appreciate that, but that's one of the reasons that Tillamook County joined the Coho lawsuit, joined you in fighting that Coho lawsuit. And when we talked to NOAA Fisheries, again, we're one of the very few areas in Tillamook County. We've got 2 river systems, one to the north, the Nehalem, and one to the south, the Nestucca, where ODFW allows a take of wild coho depending on the season, because we've got so many wild coho coming back. That's one of the reasons that this lawsuit against the Tillamook State Forest and the Clatsop State Forest really makes no sense. But you're absolutely right. We don't know what a judge might do. We don't. That's one of the reasons we're in this with the department, making sure that we fight this every step of the way. So point taken. I appreciate your thoughts there. I do. We'll have to give that some consideration. We will. So thank you for that, Jim. I appreciate it. Any other comments?
You bet. Oh, not right now.
Okay, perfect. State Forester Mukomoto, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair. Appreciate the invitation to join you today. And since we met on Tuesday, it seems like it was just yesterday we were together. This week I spent the week in the eastern area touring. Yesterday I spent touring private industrial forest lands on the east side, and we talked a lot about the upcoming PFA, fire season, and other activities. And so these are what's on the minds. It also dovetails with some of the discussion that we're looking at. How do we get the department back on a financial fair footing? And that's going to be in the form of hopefully of a legislative concept that'll be coming out pretty soon. As other things move on, next week will be the signing of the PFA in Portland, and looking forward to that ceremony. And on Monday, the board, we are just working our board to death. Not only did we have a meeting this week, but with with the counties on the HCP and the DEIS, but Monday we will have a virtual meeting that may not be as exciting. It's going to be a hearing and then talking about the legislative concept. So thank you for having me here, and I'm looking forward to hearing and participating in your discussions.
And we appreciate you being here very much. We do. Thank you so much. Okay, so what we are doing today, here we go. Got my agenda back, I found it. So the department, and this is for the commissioners, the department had suggested that we cancel the next 3 or 4 FTLAC meetings because there were going to be no items presented to the Board of Forestry that really were pertinent to FTLAC. But we just thought better of that. And so I apologize for all the meetings we're going to be having. But we have some very, very difficult work in front of us. The EIS, the draft EIS, and the HCP, and the upcoming FMP. And we've got a deadline right now of September 7th, I believe. So we just did not feel it was good for us to be canceling these meetings. And so that's like today's meeting. We decided not to cancel this meeting. And we're kind of formulating testimony for the June 8th Board of Forestry meeting. Even though there are going to be no real action items relevant to FTLAC, we feel that we do need to continue to comment on what's happening with the draft EIS and the HCP. So again, I do apologize for all the meetings we're going to have, but we're in the thick of things right now as we speak. So I'm hoping you're all going to stick with us. I do want to make one apology for Commissioner Sweet. He had a death in the family yesterday, and he is going to a memorial service this afternoon. He's sorry that he cannot make it today. So he, of course, is excused. So again, going back to our meeting on Tuesday, I thought it was a great meeting. I thought things went very well. We're starting to build relationships with at least a couple of the Board of Forestry members, which is really good. We had one, Ben, who said that, he's watching all of these FTLAC meetings, which is super. So the conversations that we're having today about trying to develop a testimony for the Board of Forestry on the 8th, I believe, of June is really important. It is. So I think the conversations that we have here today should be as if the Board of Forestry members were with us at this FTLAC meeting. Hopefully they will be watching this meeting after the fact and get a feel for our continuing conversation on the draft EIS and the HCP coming up. So at least that's our hope, is that we can continue the conversation. We do feel that the Board of Forestry still does not have all the proper information that they need in order to make a decision on a 70-year contract with the federal government. And that's one of the important aspects here, is that this is going to go on for a long period of time, should this be adopted. And this is a work in progress. It is. There's no doubt about that. So with that, let's just, and you will excuse me, I'm not feeling in the best of shape today, but I think I'm doing okay. But I would much prefer that other people do as much talking as possible. So who would like to start? No, but oh, there, Commissioner Banks, there you go.
Well, so I went through the meeting that we had this week that we, sat in with the Board of Forestry, and I came up with 6 pages of comments and questions. And so I was going to start with one, and then I'll let another friend speak, and then I'll continue until hopefully we have time for 6 pages, but I don't know if we will. So anyhow, I've heard throughout this process, numerous people talk about the situation we are looking at going forward, and we cannot continue as we are. I do not necessarily disagree, but my concern with this entire process is that we gave up way more than we needed to for fear of what is to come. And we've discussed some of those giveaways already. At the board meeting, we spoke to the dynamic impact that these decisions are likely to have. I think it's great that there is a discussion and that we should work together on a path forward. Mike made it very clear, however, that working together to find a path forward is not in the plan. So the plan is to implement the HCP as written. If the habitat conservation areas are bigger than they needed to be, well, from what it sounds like, we're gonna just have to deal with it. If the counties need to drop a bed from their care homes or, you know, a teacher from their schools, the thought process is we should have budgeted better. So if we lose sheriffs and deputies, crime is something that we're gonna have to get used to. So I feel like the department should be able to justify every acre of reserve timber. The justification shouldn't be because it was easier to draw it there, or broad statements such as we provided connectivity. I feel like that's kind of a junk statement. 5 acres for us equals a teacher for 1 year. And I guess the question I have is, why can't you, I mean, you can't find 5 acres? Because I can. I bet you can. And one of the alternatives is less acres in the HCA. If that is a potential option, my goodness, can we please choose it? There should have been someone at every meeting saying, do we have to give this up? Instead, it sounds like it was more a conversation of, can we justify giving it up? And I feel like that's a very different conversation. My hope is that we can take some time that we need to get this right. If there are places that we're fairly in broad agreement about, considering like such as Coho or Miralettes, let's proceed there. But if we are going to charge heavily forward because we can't take a week, a month, or even a year to discuss this with all interested parties and make sure that we have the right answer, well, those impacts that we discussed at the last meeting are purely and solely your fault. And this HCP really should be a perspective of, we can't find a single acre. We did such a good job. Instead, it's a conversation regarding the fact that you gave away so much of the HCAs, and they are significantly larger than the habitat commitment would be by your own admittance. Instead, I encourage you to use that adaptive management tool written into the HCP. Start with less, because once it's given away, we're never getting it back. And I don't understand the rush. If the Coho lawsuit is the concern, write a Coho HCP and then take the time with the rest of this. So that's where I'm starting, because I wanted to respond directly to the comments made previously here today. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Banks. We'll be coming back to you for the rest of your 6 pages. Commissioner Tucker.
So Courtney, was that half of a page, a quarter of a page? How many more do we have for bullets? So I don't mean to pick on you. So Commissioner Bangs, I appreciate you greatly. So at the earlier this week meeting, we were asked to not talk about the lawsuit, not talk about some issues. But one of my frustrations is that we've not been supportive of the HCP. We've not been heard during the development of the HCP, and our concerns and issues, I don't feel, have been addressed in the creation of the HCP. We do have a pending lawsuit that's now out and soon to be on its way to the Supreme Court that I have hopes that we're going to win. As we settled that first lawsuit, the most recent lawsuit, as we settled it, it was based upon the future damages based upon some dollar level. I worry about the changes in this plan with the HCP and what that means, that it means actually another lawsuit. It means one more time. And as we continue to go down this path of trying to defend the counties and hold us, get back some value for what was industrial timberland, and keep that value near what it would be if it was back in private hands, I would be remiss in not doing the responsible job as a commissioner, which would be leading that lawsuit and asking that we do another lawsuit as soon as the HCP is done, because it worries me, because that's a contract for 70 years, and it is significantly less than what we used for the calculation of the assumption of future loss. And I would hope that the Board of Forestry would hear that and know that I think there, again, I'm speaking for only myself, but I believe there's grounds that we may in fact win the appeal if we do win the movement to the state Supreme Court. If we win that, what they're doing, what's being proposed to go forward is so much less. I would have a responsibility as soon as that starts to happen to sue again.
I'm muted. Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate that very much. Mr. DiLorenzo, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to talk about the lawsuit. I am going to share my impressions of the meeting that occurred on May 10th. First, I'd like to say I have great respect for everybody on this call, but I do think it's important that I share my unabashed viewpoints. And so please forgive me in advance if I am less diplomatic than our chair. The meeting was billed to be a discussion between the members of the board and county representatives, professionally facilitated. I was hopeful that the facilitated discussion might address the 3 points that we had raised at the April 29th meeting, which was first, a better relationship necessarily requires resolution of our differences and acknowledgement of our role as partners, number one. Number two, that engagement at the tail end of the HCP process could only take place if the counties were allowed input and a seat at the table. And third, that we sink or swim together within the bounds of this diminishing revenue pie, which is now on a downward trajectory, especially if a majority of our forests are declared off limits to any productive use, which would be the necessary result of this HCP. The fact that the meeting took place, I thought, was a significant development. And I want to thank the State Forester and Chair Kelly for that. The discussion, as critical as I am about it, was much better than the mere 15 minutes which the board officially affords the counties to have input during each board meeting. So I thought that was excellent. Unfortunately, even a professional facilitator, though, was not able to generate much of a two-way conversation between the board and the counties. First, I did appreciate the state forester's reference to all of you as his county partners. Cal, I really appreciated that. As far as I can tell, you are the first person at the Department of Forestry to have referred to the counties that way. There was no such acknowledgement, however, from anyone else. Staff went out of their way to refer to the federal services as partners and gave special recognition to the tribes, but never once recognized the interests of the counties in any of the formal presentations. When the time came for the counties to engage in a conversation with the board, the representatives of the federal services were no longer on the line. Many of you, and by you I mean county representatives, addressed specific questions, intending them to be answered by board members, only to see them deflected to staff. Why that exercise required a professional facilitator is beyond me. I I did learn the following though. First, it was my impression that board members who have the legal responsibility to make this decision that will tie the state's hands for the next 70 years were not familiar enough with the HCP or the draft environmental impact statement to even begin to answer your questions. For instance, one of the board members still thought that the board could pick and choose among the EIS alternatives, only to then be corrected by staff. When the staff attempted answers, they had no satisfactory responses. For instance, staff could not justify why there was still a huge delta between the business case analysis estimates that began this process and the latest EIS harvest estimates. They could not explain why substitution of finished product for standing timber could not also serve as a carbon sequestration strategy. They could not explain why the expectations for the no action alternative, which would continue take avoidance, which should, given declining owl populations, allow for greatest harvest of timber, why that would have such anemic results in their assumptions. Most importantly, Chair Kelly just today acknowledged that this train has left the station and that the HCP can't be changed unless we start all over. Well, with all due respect, frankly, the fact that the board has just realized that is of great concern. We have known that all along. And that is why we asked from the very beginning to be at the table all along. And now the board has itself in a position where it has a binary choice, either accede to what staff has given away to the federal agencies or start all over and take other litigation risks. I think we should start all over. I think we should abandon this HCP. We should take Commissioner Bang's suggestion that we write an independent Coho HCP, and we should then do this right, especially if the decisions that you're going to make are going to tie our state's hands for the next 70 years. Mr. Chair, thank you for the chance to share my unabashed impressions.
Thank you, Mr. DiLorenzo. You're always welcome at our meetings. You are. So we appreciate that very much. Commissioner Scar.
Well, that's a hard act to follow, Mr. DiLorenzo.
It is. It is.
So I will say that I'm starting from a different place. I understand Mr. DiLorenzo's desire, his comments that this should be thrown out the window and start again. And I don't disagree that that would be a great opportunity. I think, however, there is another path that we would be remiss not to walk down, which is the one that says, if we are unable to make that happen, how do we create something that is the least damaging, the most, I don't know, I'm going to go with the least damaging. I don't know that I can find a most positive. So the least damaging. And I think within the conversation that we had with the Board of Forestry, I heard some things that that I think give us a place to pursue least damaging. I think Commissioner Banks has brought forward some of that in how can we change how many acres we're putting into the HCAs and the HCP, right? Are we at a place where we can move some of that around? I think that's great to look at. What can we do? Because if I understand correctly, the HCP still has the ability for some tweaking in this period. The other piece that really stuck with me was the adaptive management piece. If I heard any hopeful part in there, it's in truly understanding and crafting the adaptive management piece. And maybe I'm completely misunderstanding the ability to even craft it at all. In which case I go with Mr. DiLorenzo that this should go out the window and begin again. Because if we are stuck with the federal government defining the adaptive management piece for us by what NOAA Fisheries and others decide they will allow us to change in a 70-year contract. We are no better off than having that judge in charge with the Coho lawsuit. It's exactly the same thing if we are handing this over to their decision-making in relation to adaptive management. So I think there's some real probing and as to exactly what that means and whether or not we can align some pieces in that adaptive management that give us that ability to truly respond not only to the species of fish and the birds and the voles and all of those things, but also us as human beings. And I said that in the meeting, and I will continue to say that we are one of the species, our community and the people within it are one of the affected species that has to be included in this. So if we can find a way moving forward to understand adaptive management, to feel ensured that we will have the opportunity to be equally valued, there might be a place to move forward. In the event that we're turning this over to the federal agencies where we have to go to them and pander and say, we think we have enough acreage. Here's why we think we do. We're seeing these animals and these fish and this recovery, and they're the only ones that get to say yes or no to changes. Let's just go with the Coho lawsuit. At least it's only one species and one judge that we're up against instead of the entire federal government. It's full bureaucracy. So I hope for a way forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Scar. Those are great observations. They are things that we need to really think about. That's great. Commissioner Bangs.
Oh, and with the adaptive management piece, I feel like had fewer acres been included in these HCAs, we would have had a better chance with future adaptive management. But I think that since we just gave away the farm inside the HCP, I don't think we're going to be able to get it back. I think once it's gone, it's gone. I mean, that's my personal opinion and my assumption in regards to, you know, the federal process. But I wanted to bring up that numerous board members called out the exact question that I've raised over time with the no action alternative. There's a very likely scenario where no action has harvest levels very similar to what we have now. Shockingly, the response was that the HCP was developed in the lens of the greatest permanent value, but I guess with the underlying comment that the FMP was not, I have always assumed that the FMP was supposed to be operating under greatest permanent value, but I guess I was misunderstood or misunderstanding. But it was not, in fact, developed with greatest permanent value. It was 50% environmental, and then we're left to balance what's left. So no answer was given to what it would take to remove the potential T&E explosion. You did not address, I feel like, my concerns regarding the no action alternative and the bias within the modeling data. You did speak to how you called out habitat and said it would be occupied, which doesn't need to be debated as it was phrased. So apparently it starts in 2023 that we are going to be occupied. But even though we're nowhere close to 100% right now, and that's very easy for us to prove today, what with the ratio of current habitat and current unoccupied. But I feel like ODF chose to go to not go extreme in the definition of habitat, but then you went very extreme on saying 100% of it was going to be occupied. So I'm going to circle to the HCA size. It was discussed at our previous meeting that the HCAs, or it was admitted to, I guess, to say that the HCAs were larger than the habitat commitments would be. That really stuck with me. And I was curious, do you have a number here? Because it's difficult for me to tell by looking at the HCP, since there are some overlap between the species. So how much wiggle room did you give yourself? Are the commitments 90% of the acreage of the HCA? Are they 70%? Are they 50%? How much wiggle room did you give yourself? And if it's greater than 10%, is that wise? Shouldn't we try to give up the minimum that we need and then monitor this every 5 to 10 years as called for in the plan and add additional acres as needed? If there is a concern about these acres not being available, a prudent strategy would be to set the amount of acres available to trade at any given point in time. So this would prove flexibility to achieve goals without hamstringing us economically. And in my opinion, unnecessarily. We have a habitat commitment in the HCP. From all appearances, we went above and beyond from your own statements. So the question is, of the acres that you believe will grow into habitat, what did we commit to? Okay, how many acres are in each HCA that we never modeled to grow into habitat? And what benefit are they providing us? I really am curious. How much did you give away that wasn't necessary to give away? Because you yourself admitted you went above and beyond the call of duty in writing this plan. And you gave us no backtrack. You just gave it all away. And from a negotiation perspective, I feel like there was no negotiation. You sat in there and you just started throwing things at them and they were like, great, let's take it all. Instead of being frugal and fiscal and starting with maybe 10% and then monitoring it, adapting as we are supposed to monitor and adapt. So that's my HCA size concern. I'll come back and give another person a chance to speak.
Thank you, Commissioner Bangs. So if any of the staff want to comment on any of these questions that are being asked, please just let me know. I'm more than happy to have you address these questions. Again, it's kind of our intent here, I think, to make sure that the Board of Forestry members watch this, and maybe you can answer these questions for them to their satisfaction. So just want to put that out there. Commissioner Thompson.
Well, thank you, sir. Well, happy Friday afternoon, everybody. It's good to be here together to be wrestling with public policy issues. I just want to appreciate my colleague, Commissioner Bangs, for her meticulous, thorough, extensive work in gathering data. I want to speak a little more philosophically. Once upon a time, I was a state agency head in Oregon. So I was a member of the executive branch of government. I was clear that I served at the pleasure of my board, and my board served at the pleasure of the governor. I assume that set of authorities still exists. So I have an appreciation for your situation. I also know that we are all dealing with the impacts as described by the state legislature, which is dominated by the population centers. And again, those folks want parks and recreational opportunities. But we county commissioners have services to provide if we are to have habitable communities. And if people who are not aware in the executive or the legislative branch put our backs to the wall because we're going to go bankrupt because of the policies and the way that they are implemented. Yeah, I don't like lawsuits. I was married to a lawyer. It's no fun and it's really expensive. I think there's probably a better way to do things. On the other hand, when our backs are up against the wall, if I saw another alternative, I would be eager to take it. And I'm asking you, I'm begging with you, help us see an alternative so that we don't go bankrupt. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. As well said. Thank you so much. Chair Kelly.
Sure. Commissioner Thompson, I think my wife will write a very large check to any candidate running for governor who will promise to fire me. Seriously, I do want to point out that we don't face a binary choice. We do have the different alternatives that have been presented. I know that probably none of them are hugely appealing, but there is a relatively significant difference between those, and I think we need to focus on that. Anyhow, that's and then going back to my original point, it's tough working with all the federal services. Yes, that's true. But I would not relish us all dealing with a federal judge who holds all the power. The board has to really take that threat, that possibility very seriously, because, despite what we all want to do and care about, we could see a scenario that takes us right down the road of what's happened on our federal forests. And where it's easy to just say, start over, I think it would be, I can't speak for the whole board, but personally, I think it would be a roll of the dice, and with very serious potential consequences that could far and above negatively affect the counties as well as the department beyond what any of us are imagining.
Thank you, Chair Kelly. I did mention that I probably wasn't going to do a lot of speaking, but I can't help myself. So I do want to bring up one issue that we've just been talking about: ODF's obligation to generate revenue. One board member seemed to indicate it at our last meeting, that by considering clear-cut harvest outside of conservation areas, the draft environmental impact statement might be showing unlikely levels of harvest for revenue generation outside of HCAs. We've also seen in the April 5th, 2022 scoping meeting notes that ODF staff are noted as saying ODF's intent is not to tie the matrix lands to production. I keep coming back to the greatest permanent value rule, particularly ORS 629-035-0021 sub 1 and sub 2, which say the state forest lands produce benefits, including sustainable and predictable production of forest products that generate revenues for the benefit of state, counties, and local taxing districts, and to secure the greatest permanent value of these lands to the state. The state forester shall maintain these lands as forest lands and actively manage them in a sound environmental manner to provide sustainable timber harvest and revenues to the state, counties, and local taxing districts. So one question here: how does ODF intend to comply with these rules? And how will ODF advise Board of Forestry members as to their responsibility under these laws? One additional question here: do you see the revenue and harvest level projections in the draft environmental impact statement as likely to be realized if the HCP is accepted, or will there be further erosion of the capability of the lands to generate revenue? I think these questions and more are really very pertinent to the discussion as we look to the Board of Forestry looking as to whether they want to adopt an HCP moving forward or not. So I'll get off my high horse here, and we have Aaron Scar next. Aaron.
Unmute, Aaron.
I always do that. I take my hand down, and then I think I've taken myself off mute. So this is, I'm going to direct it at probably Chair Kelly, maybe at staff. It feels like we've been having a lot of very directed conversation about very specific topics. Do you see anything within the HCP that you now begin to think, that is something we could adjust or change? We're supposedly looking for a path forward, but it feels as if the answers we get are always, yes, we thought about it and we are not going to change, or there is no feeling, at least from me, that there is a, that's a good point. Why don't we think that through? Can you tell me if anything that you've heard from us in the meeting that we had earlier this week, or what you're hearing today that leads you to think there are some changes that maybe we could find to make in this. I don't know if that's you, Chair Carroll, or if that's Michael, or who might answer that.
Well, I know, I can say that certainly having conversations with staff, I don't think I can really answer that, because what I don't understand well is that, where we really go off the rails and have to essentially start over very well. And I think Mike can probably address that better.
In terms of are we giving these things consideration, we certainly are. A lot of times the movement seems fairly slow because regardless of what we do at this point, we are, as I've mentioned before, while we're not picking an alternative from a set of alternatives the way we would in a federal NEPA process, well, it's a federal NEPA process, but where there's not an applicant, non-federal applicant like with an HCP, we are not just changing it at our without going through our process that we have established with the scoping team and the steering committee to maintain the support of the services in the process to make sure that we're going to have a successful HCP. So the process is good. Anytime we consider changes and want to bring forward changes, we take it through that. So, and there are still things that we are working on in the draft HCP. The sideboards set by the DEIS certainly are the sideboards outside of which would either cause the NEPA process to start over or result in a supplemental DEIS or supplemental EIS, sorry. I do not know the exact threshold of one or the other. Both increase, the time, of course. I'm assuming a supplemental EIS is less of a timing burden than the draft, than the NEPA process completely going off the rails. Anyway, we are still exploring ideas and how to best deal with adaptive management as well under the HCP. One thing that I would like to make sure that I'm clear on, and I apologize if I didn't speak clearly enough on Tuesday, but the biological goals and objectives and the habitat in there was not the basis for, it's not that plus something equals HCAs. The HCAs were designed with the principles that they were designed on. And then honestly, the potential, and you can see this in the effects analysis in the HCP, the potential habitat grown is greater than what we actually end up committing to in the biological goals and objectives. The focus there is not overcommitting on the habitat side and not being able to meet those biological goals and objectives and then running into a problem there. There's a lot of uncertainty on, all around the future. And so we wanted to make sure we had room there, quite frankly, if habitat growth estimations were too optimistic or didn't turn out. So that is because there are also stay ahead requirements associated with HCPs and so forth in terms of the amount of incidental take versus the amount of ingrowth. So just so that's clear.
Thank you for that, Michael. I appreciate it.
Can I make sure that I just understood what he said in the first half of the question, which was my half of the question? I think then he proceeded to answer part of Commissioner Banks, which is great. But in my first half of the question, it was around what changes can still be made really, and whether anything we've said is piquing the interest of something that you think the department should look at. Can you answer? You said there are sideboards. You're not sure what they are. The federal agencies drive that. Are you hearing things that lead you to believe this is a fruitful conversation for us to continue to have together? Because I think that gets at the heart of where we've been and where we hope we will go. And the feeling is that it's not a fruitful conversation. So do you hear things that you are willing to take a look at with us?
Oh, yes, yes. No, I think it's a fruitful conversation for sure. When I say I don't know where the sideboards are on, I know where the sideboards are in terms of movement within the HCP conservation actions, within the HCP design. It is clearly by definition within the alternatives of the draft EIS without starting the NEPA process over. Now, that's what I don't know is if we go where the threshold is between triggering a supplemental EIS process versus entirely, throwing away the NEPA process that we have today. And yes, they're fruitful conversations in that we are considering the input and how to best work through it with the services. Is that?
Thank you. I would just love to know at the end of this conversation or at some point, which of the things that we've spoken to you about are things that you say, yeah, I think we should explore that with the services, because I think you guys have a good point, versus which things you're like, I hear you, and we're absolutely not going to be able to move that marker. And I'm sure that we can't move that marker, because otherwise I feel like every time we get in a room together, we're going to have the very same conversation that we have had the last, I don't know how many times we've been in the room talking about this. And it's always the same things that are said by us and the same things that are said by you. And until there's some, and I understand that was potentially some of the hope of the facilitated conversation was for someone on the other side to say, gosh, I hear you guys. And I think that's a good point. I'm going to take that back and I'm going to consider that. And we're going to walk it through with the services. That to me would be a change in this conversation, a movement in this dialogue that might lead us to a way forward. And I feel like in the absence of that, we're going to keep beating you over the head with the same stick we walked into the room with for the last 5, 6, 10 times we've all been together. So it just feels like if we want movement, I mean, Commissioner Bangs has listed a million data points and different pieces, and I've heard her list them repeatedly. I've never heard the ODF, anyone in that world say, I hear you. And I think that's something maybe we could or should look at. So I think the difference for us between a way forward and continuing the same conversation until we run out of time is that. So thank you for letting me have my input, and I apologize. I think Commissioner Magruder was next.
Commissioner, can I jump in there? Because I think you really have a situation here. You really can't have your cake and eat it too, because I was in a meeting with Mike and others this morning for 2 hours, and we spent a significant amount of time speaking around some of these specific ideas that had come up on Tuesday and what we could do. And there's going to be some work on that. But at the same time, we are here dealing, you've got your attorney there. You guys have said, okay, we've sued you. We hope that's going to be successful. And also we may sue you again. And then you're asking us to be completely open about this process as we go through trying to figure out how we can actually adapt some of this stuff. You put us in a really difficult position, legally, because we have to be responsible to the taxpayers of the state of Oregon. And so I wish that this, we didn't have this lawsuit. I wish we could have more open discussions, but this is the situation that we are in and will continue to be in. So you need to, I beg you to understand and accept that you can't get everything discussed as openly as you might have in another circumstance.
Thank you for that perspective, Chair Kelly. And it just makes me sad to think that from the public perspective, we're all stuck in an endless cycle that's going to end up with us beating each other overhead with the same stick repeatedly. So thank you for the perspective. I wish it were different as well.
You're right.
I invite us
You're
to
right.
think if there are ways we can work together, because I think that's what we were asked to do in the Board of Forestry meeting this week, was to find ways that we could work together. And I continue to look for that as an option.
Well, it makes me sad too. There's no doubt about it.
So thank you to both of you. I do appreciate that very much. Let's go to Commissioner Magruder. Margaret.
Oh, good afternoon. Here, Commissioner Scar. Thank you for speaking out. I apologize. I missed the facilitated meeting and I thought that it might bring better results. One of the things that I spoke with the folks, Ellen and crew, about was building that relationship with the Board of Forestry where we could exchange ideas, where we could understand one another's needs. We all are representing the people of the state of Oregon. And that's what it's all about. It's not about my needs or Commissioner Scar's needs. It's about the needs of the state of Oregon. And it really does make us, I think, all very sad that we're not able to really, I guess, openly discuss it and also to solve some of these problems. I'm a farmer and I would never make a plan that lasted 70 years for my operation without a lot of flexibility in it. And this plan doesn't seem to have that sort of flexibility that you need for adaptive management. I mean, in addition to being a farmer, I've lived over 70 years. And let me tell you, there's a lot of adaptations that you do in that time. And if the same plan that I'd started out with was still in place, I'm not sure where I'd be. That plan that I made in the 60s might have taken me off on a different course. I really think that we need to have a great deal more flexibility in our ability to manage our forests. We've got a lot of climate issues coming up. Who would have thought that I'd still be wearing a wool sweater on the 13th of May? This is obviously we've all agreed that there's some changes in our climate. So I also want to speak briefly to the point of the greatest permanent value. I know that the Department of Forestry has economic issues, and I certainly know that Columbia County has economic issues. We just have been working on our budget, as all counties are at this moment in time, and we hardly have enough money to support the services that we are mandated to provide for the citizens of our county. Our Sheriff's Department has 6 road deputies. That covers 688 square miles, 550 miles of county road. Come on, you know, it doesn't take long to do the math there with six people working 8-hour days to figure out that not much coverage for safety in Columbia County. And I think that is true of most all of our other counties. And let me tell you, for an old woman that lives alone in a rural area, speak to that, Commissioner Thompson, that public safety is pretty important. So I really think it sounds like I'm hearing many different themes here, and since I missed the meeting the other day, maybe they were more solid then, but I'm hearing that there isn't much flexibility in changing the HCP. Anything in it, is that the case, or the only way to do it is to go to court? Is that the only case? I guess I need to have a little bit more clarity on some of these issues, but bottom line is, in order to manage any natural resource, we've got to have adaptability. We've got to be able to make changes when they're needed. And it doesn't appear to me that this process is allowing our foresters to have that ability. Thank you.
And again, I'd just like to reemphasize that while there's certain sideboards on the amount of change, in the HCP at this point. It does not mean that there is no change in the HCP possible. And however, we do go through the process with the scoping team to make sure that everybody's being brought along and we're not dropping a surprise on the services at the end of the day. And also our state partners. I mean, I don't want to, you know, our other agencies, ODFW, DSL, DEQ, have really been instrumental in helping us design these strategies. And so while at the end of the day, the HCP is an agreement between, you know, the applicant and the services, you know, we do realize that we're in the process of serving all Oregonians and getting the advice from other state agencies like we do in everything else we do, whether it's our FMP, our IP, our AOPs, and having them at the table and brought along is also important. And so we wouldn't want to make a wholesale change without taking it through the process. And so when we come up with an idea, we take it to the scoping team and we start to move that idea along and get everybody's input about what that might look like. So anyway, that's just why, you know, again, change is slow. Although we are trying to, we're trying to do it as quickly as possible. Don't get me wrong. When we come up with, you know, and trying to put the final touches on this HCP and make final adjustments to the HCP, just given the timeline. But we still need to honor the process.
Thank you, Michael. Chair Kelly.
Thank you. You know, just thinking around some specifics because, you know, as we look at those different alternatives, we have quite a bit of opportunity to mix and match and pick and choose within that. For example, you know, a couple of things that I think would be great to do more of. One is dealing with more of the Swiss needle cast. Because, you know, we have forest there that is doing nothing. And so it's going to be in our long-term best interest for the department and the county to deal with more of those acres. That will be something that I would personally support in terms of one of the changes that we can do. And, you know, another one to strongly consider, which I think is also on the table, is more barred owl work on controlling the barred owls. Just throwing out some examples of things that I think are still, you know, in play, and things that I would think that that we might be able to find some where we're seeing eye to eye with you all and hopefully all of the board.
Thank you, Chair Kelly. Let's go to Commissioner Banks.
So I just wanted to, before I get started, I wanted to circle back to Commissioner Scar. No, Mike did not answer any of the question that I asked. We were effectively talked into a circle with no answers. I just wanted to clarify. And then to another comment that was made about the fear in protecting our taxpayers and the fear of a lawsuit. Clatsop County, I know all of you have noticed at this point that Clatsop County is no longer very shy about speaking out. Obviously, there has been a change in the position that I'm sitting in, and I will be very clear, I was elected because of my ability to research, but not only that, because of my knowledge of the topic. This is my wheelhouse, and I know that that's confused many, but this is my degree in college. So now granted, it wasn't forestry, but agriculture is pretty darn close. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to be able to figure this out. So I just wanted to ask a question, I guess. At what point will the consideration of Clatsop County outweigh the consideration of another lawsuit? Or the consideration of your forest trustland counties outweigh the Coho lawsuit? I am just flabbergasted that more consideration is being given to the Coho lawsuit than is the Lynn County lawsuit or Clatsop County. And I was under the misassumption when I first started this job that because Clatsop County wasn't a part of that Lynn County lawsuit, that maybe we had a voice, maybe somebody would hear us. Maybe somebody would talk to me, maybe somebody would give me answers. I was under the misassumption that I could have conversation and not feel like I'm talking to a brick wall. So that was just kind of a few thoughts, but I wanted to circle to financial viability. So at the current department costs and anticipated returns, is this economically feasible? Okay, any costs saved from T&E surveys appear to be taken up by higher logging costs, additional monitoring, less volume. So what happens if the department doesn't make enough money to continue with this HCP? What if we cannot make our commitments that we've made? What happens if we get 5 years in and we have to fold? We're bankrupt. What would the repercussions be? What are the penalties? I think that's the biggest thing for me. Well, not the biggest thing, because I want to circle back to owls, so somebody else brought that up. But what are the penalties for us not being able to sustain, or for you to go bankrupt? So is there a penalty?
Sorry, I don't think we're gonna get an answer to that question right now.
Yeah, I don't really have an answer to that right now, if that's.
So Commissioner Banks, before you move on to owls, can I go to Commissioner Scar very quickly? Thank you. Commissioner Scar.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Chair Kelly for my piece of cake. That's exactly what I'm looking for, Chair Kelly. It's exactly that piece of a reciprocal conversation that says, we heard you and we are considering. So I just wanted to thank you for my piece of cake. And I hope that we can continue to exchange pieces of cake going forward. I hope that when you hear something that you think, there's a possibility, I'm going to take that back and have a little conversation with the scoping team, that you'll let us know you heard us, and that you're going to take that back to the scoping team so that we know that we really are being heard by one another, and we really are jointly working to come up with the very best HCP that is possible, if that's the path we go down. And that, yeah, we can't have everything we want. Some of the things that we would really like to have you change in the HCP may not be possible, but just let's exchange cake. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Scar. Let's go back to Commissioner Banks.
And on the note of cake, the Board of Forestry will be getting my 6 pages of questions, and hopefully you'll have time to get some answers for us, because I lay awake at night with these thoughts and these ideas in my head, and I would sure like somebody to ask the question and get an answer for us before proceeding. But so I don't know who brought up owls, but I will these little creatures, man. All right, so as mentioned numerous times, the removal of barred owls is key to the revival of the spotted owl. So it was mentioned that we would likely be a part of any barred owl removal program. And if I recall from previous meetings, the department is already in participation of these types of programs in our southern districts. So in doing so, we were given an incidental take permit. So let's look at what has been done in the past when we look to the future. The assumptions we are making here under the no action is that we will be doing barred owl management, but without any of the benefits that we have gotten in the past, and that it would have a much more profound effect than has been shown. So there were some anecdotal comments of, we saw an owl come back once. And for me, that's not frankly good enough to explain the profound increase in locked up acres. Sure, some owls may come back. Some owls may already be here and hiding. The whole forest is not going to be inundated with owls like the modeling shows. The modeling was wrong. And if you haven't noticed, I'm super upset about it. And I would request new modeling that shows actual truth occurring across the landscape. And I really hope the Board of Forestry requests that modeling too, because the scientist in me is very irritated if you haven't noticed about that. And it is a nugget that I can't seem to let go inside of my brain, because I cannot believe that a state agency gave federal services a model that federal services felt the need to call out in the first 100 pages and say, hey guys, this isn't our fault. We don't think that this is true. They called you out in the actual draft EIS. And I'm not sure, like, it was pretty bold to me of them pointing to your modeling data and saying it's wrong. And I don't know, I'm sitting over here. I think federal services is correct in both of their assumptions. You know, our climate's changing, that's a concern. And barred owls are the cause of loss of spotted owl, and that will continue to be the issue no matter what. So I'm just curious, you know, is ODF right or is services right? Like, who's right in this conversation? I think federal services are right, but I'm getting a different story from ODF. So, yeah, I really want new modeling. Can somebody do that for me, please?
Thank you, Commissioner Bangs. Let's go to State Forester Mukomoto. Kel.
Well, I thought I should say a few words here, but you know, coming in at the 11th hour in this process, it's you know, I don't know the entire history, but you know, when I was presented with the idea, the concept of an HCP on state lands, it appealed to me. I think the same way the PFA appealed, you know, might have appealed to our larger industrial partners, and that was one of stability in the way we manage endangered species on the lands. And I'm still hoping that we can get to a model like that where there is a benefit, but I don't want to. I am not minimizing the socio-economic importance of timber harvest off our state lands. I understand that, and so what I'd like to, you know, I don't know how much. I think I'm like with like Chair Kelly, and I need to get more knowledgeable. He doesn't necessarily need to get more. I need to get more knowledgeable about this. But you know, going through the DEIS process, what are the sideboards that we have to work, and how much can we, you know, as we listen to our county partners here and their concerns for their constituents, how much can we change with the path going forward? And because I realize that if we say, let's just restart this whole process, it's going to throw us back. A lot of this HCP was designed through careful work with the other state agencies that are concerned with wildlife and fisheries. And it was also worked with OSU and now with the services. Courtney, I can't say that we're going to be able to answer that modeling question specifically, but I think we need to talk about it and say, what is it about that modeling that causes services to make that comment? And you know, what's the significance of the impact on our HCP? You know, this is frustrating because we also get we get stakeholder input. Interesting, on the same facts, we'll get opposite reactions. Like the conservationists are concerned about us over harvesting on our AOPs, our annual operating plans, for some of the same reasons that John Sweet, for example, is asking about. Why is there such a drop down to the no action from the previous? And that's because of certain, you know, I asked that same question on Mike. I go, Mike, what is this? You know, what's going on here? And he said, he explained it to me, and I don't want to get into it now. Being a forester, I understood what he was talking about. But to explain the technical stuff to people who are not foresters, it gets very complicated. But it's interesting to me is that we're getting from conservation groups going, you're over harvesting, and then from our county partners are saying, God, you guys aren't harvesting enough. And let me tell you that is not, at least from the leadership, it's not our intent not to do any harvesting. I mean, on these lands, and I know that you guys know that. But I also hear the need that, you know, every acre means something. It means staffing. It means repairing that pothole. It means hopefully dealing like John was. You know, I live in Coos County and I see the same things John sees. And, you know, with our society that we have and the issues we deal with. So, you know, I will say I'm going to sit down with Mike and Kyle and start saying, I want to see your 6-page letter, Courtney, because those are going to be some of the questions I want to look at and say, you know, here are the questions. I got this book I've been writing and writing and writing. And so I know there's a lot of questions in this book. This week, I apologize. I've been on the road. I haven't had time to sit down. I've been dealing with fire issues in Central Oregon. You know, that's just part of the job. But hopefully maybe next week, Mike, we can talk and we can set up some time to go through these questions and start looking at what are meaningful things we can do in this process without throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So thank you.
Thank you, State Forester Mukomoto. I do appreciate those comments very much. Let me add a little bit about modeling. So from my point of view, population modeling and take and mitigation calculation, this has to be completed. The Board of Forestry needs this information before it can give further direction to ODF. We have long said population modeling is needed. ODF hypothesizes that setting aside hundreds of thousands of acres will increase covered species populations. But ODF staff have also described the benefits of barred owl removal, even as it has dismissed the Council of Forest Trust Land Counties alternative built around barred owl removal. Without population modeling, we cannot see the benefits. For example, scientific studies show continued population decline of spotted owls, even within extensive federal reserves. As ODF staff mentioned at the Board of Forestry meeting, U.S. Fish and Wildlife has found that uplisting of the species to endangered is warranted. How is it that additional large HCAs on state forest lands will do what federal reserves have not? In other words, recovered the species. Other key numbers for decision makers, such as jobs and revenue, and State Forester Mukomoto, this is why I appreciate your comments very much. Jobs and revenue are quantified, though misleadingly. These numbers cannot be properly assessed without knowing how covered species populations are affected by the HCP. We believe the Board of Forestry must have these numbers before it can decide to implement an HCP. We further believe that population modeling would help make more realistic no action alternatives instead of the current version, which is highly optimistic in its expectation of the recovery of covered species. Modeling would support a robust risk analysis. ODF has stated the benefits of an HCP, including providing certainty, stabilizing and perhaps increasing covered species population, and protections from lawsuits. On the other hand, the take avoidance approach would allow for higher harvest levels while avoiding take without the need for mitigation. The business case analysis may have been intended to provide a risk analysis, but as we've heard, it did not due to incomplete development of the hypothetical HCP it analyzed. Now that we have a better understanding of what an HCP might require, the Board of Forestry should conduct a formal risk assessment. Without a risk assessment, we don't see how the ODF can meet its obligation to provide the greatest permanent value as directed by law. So just wanted to put that out there for everyone. Commissioner Bangs, you've still got your hand up. Go ahead.
I do, and I probably will to the bitter end. So yes, I will be definitely emailing out all 6 pages and all of the questions, because I went through every single action and I analyzed every single action that was presented to the board this week. And plus I have comments regarding the presentation that was given to the board. So anyhow, I did want to go to action 5. And I just had a question in regards to action 5. So if there was a possibility of getting an incidental take permit with other proposed actions, why would the department not immediately start looking at action 5? If the intent of the HCP is to achieve an incidental take permit, I would assume the goal would be to give up the least amount of acreage possible in order to do so. So if there is a potential for 1 less acre set aside in conservation areas, it is clear that the department has not done a good enough job on not giving up more than they needed to in order to reach this goal. So I'm just curious, like, if the intent of the HCP is to achieve an incidental take permit, why are we giving up so much? Is there a possibility of getting a permit with fewer acres? And like, why can't we start looking at action 5?
Thank you, Commissioner Bangs. You're the only one with your hand up, Commissioner. If you'd like to continue.
I can. So I'm gonna start at the top of the meeting this week with the Board of Forestry and the presentation. So I have some takeaways from that. And I had the joyful experience of rewatching ourselves. That's always weird to me. But so EIS requires implementation to be economically feasible. So at the current department costs and anticipated returns, is this economically feasible? Any costs saved from the T&E surveys appear to be taken up by higher logging costs. I know I'm repeating myself. Is this economically feasible? Okay, I sense that there will be no response to that question.
So I guess I'm unsure here. You're going to submit these questions, correct?
Yeah, but I'd really like an answer. What my fear is yes, I'm going to be sending these questions into a vortex, but am I going to get an answer?
So, okay, in that case, I'll take a shot there. You suggest higher logging costs. And the logging costs that were used in the model were the best ones we had. Could they be updated? Yes, they could be. They are being up. We do update them regularly, and we will be updating them for the FMP modeling as well, which will give us a much better idea. Likewise, the prices. Are the log prices correct? And maybe we're always updating those as well. And we use long-term averages for those. We want to capture recessions, and we also want to capture high points. They are what they're plainly reflected, I think, in the data that's been provided. So I guess, if there's specific logging cost questions about or log price questions about that, we'd be happy to have those. And we're pretty used to working through Mark and Mike now to get at some of those questions.
Okay, so no answer on whether or not this is economically feasible. So I'm going to move to carbon sequestering. So by the charts provided, the no action is leagues better than any of the other actions that were presented. This data started in 2023, so that's next year. Starting next year, the no action appears to sequester almost 3 times the carbon as the proposed alternative. And I find that pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive. If the goal is to sequester carbon the best option is clearly the no action. I assume the reason for the gigantic pillar under the no action alternative is that starting next year, all the TNE species that have not been present or currently existing in habitat will fly in and take roost. And it's going to be a very busy year for all of those species. But I just, well, I'm a little facetious on this one, I have to admit. So anyhow, but by all appearances, if we were worried about carbon sequestering, we would choose the no action alternative.
So Mike, you want to take a crack at that one?
Oh, no, I mean, the carbon outcomes are what they are, you know, as calculated by the, you know, essentially they're just the biomass calculation. They're from the yield tables, from the model outputs. I just wanted to say, and I know it doesn't make a great deal of difference in your analysis of this, but species were not considered it was at year 10 in the model is when we set those acres as if they were occupied based on what we had run forward. We didn't do it from the very beginning of the model.
Thank you, Mike. So I'm going to take a chair's prerogative here and have one more comment myself, and then we'll see if anyone else has any comments. I'm cognizant of it's a Friday afternoon. It's getting late. We've been at this for about an hour and a half. I know Courtney has probably 5 more pages left. Courtney, I know you're going to send that out to everyone. So I want to discuss very briefly the NEPA timeline. So, you know, we continue to hear about the tight timeline for the HCP imposed by the NEPA process. I read in a summary on the ODF website of a recent HCP scoping team meeting that a federal official stated that the NEPA process must be completed by March 8th, 2023, and that NOAA Fisheries does not issue extensions. This is very concerning to me. It is completely inappropriate for ODF to be bound by timeline rules designed to push projects when there are so many questions yet to resolve. ODF must request a pause or an extension to the NEPA timeline. If ODF needs the counties to help with this request, either by contacting Department of Commerce or Interior Management, or our congressional delegation, we certainly will do so. Matter of fact, I'll be heading to Denver in July for the NACO annual conference, where we meet with all of our federal delegation. I'll also be going to Washington, D.C. in February for the NACO legislative conference, where again, we meet with our federal delegates. So with that, I just want to see if anyone else has any comments to make, and if you are okay with us ending this meeting as we stand right now. I want to make sure that everyone's good with this. Commissioner Scar.
Thank you, Commissioner Yamamoto. I think my question would be, I think we heard from State Forester that he would be sitting down with his team. I think we heard from Courtney, she's sending off her 6 pages. I think we've raised any number of questions. Is it fair to ask for when we would expect to circle back? I know we have kept our FTLIC meetings going through the rest of the summer. Would it be an expectation that by the next FTLIC meeting, we would have an opportunity to maybe take this conversation a little bit further forward, having known with the State Forester and ODF having had time to chew on the questions and to come back and let us know if there are areas that they see some possibility, and again, to try to just sort of move this conversation in a forward fashion. So I guess my question would be, when might we speak again?
Yeah, can I answer that question?
Please.
Okay. I think let's get the questions in the door. We already had some of these, and I like to sit down and triage them and say, okay, let's go. We can do this. We can do this. This is going to take a lot of time. And I think maybe after we triage the questions, we can start saying, this is kind of the timeline we think we can start answering these things for you. And So I can't make a commitment right now. I'd like to, but I would really like to triage the questions and get back to you. And let's just say, Mike, is there a chance we could triage these questions fairly quickly?
Yes, yeah.
Okay,
You can
we're
certainly
gonna
go
do that
through-
hopefully next week. Next week's gonna be fairly busy, but you know, we gotta make time because you guys are important.
Thank you for that, Cal. Appreciate that very much. Michael, do you have other comments?
I was just gonna say, we're, always happy to bring you up to speed on discussions we've been having, as long as, we've already had them with the scoping team, in terms of the things that we're talking about and how we're bringing things forward. Those are things that are reflected, in the meeting minutes anyway. So, that process is intended to be transparent. So, we can't get ahead of ourselves in terms of promising something or, suggesting that we'll do something that we haven't brought through the process. But once we've started, we can at least let you know where we are in the status of that, even if a decision hasn't been made. We can say, well, we've started talking about this, that sort of thing. And so I was just looking to see if there was what that schedule looks like. So in terms of questions are one thing, and then, where we are in the process is another, in terms of how the meetings line up and when we'll be able to give you some feedback. And I don't know, I think that we will be actually meeting again after we've had a chance to be talking with the services again. And so we can let you know how conversations are developing, certainly.
Perfect. And just so everyone knows, I think we'll have more questions, which we'll be submitting. So please be on the lookout for those also. Chair Kelly.
Yeah, I hate to leave on a down note, but I really do need to object to how some of this dialogue has been handled today. If you look at it from the perspective of Cal or myself and Mike, anybody from ODF, we are operating under a situation of whatever we say can and will be used against you. And at the same time, Commissioner Bangs has asked a lot of very challenging, very difficult questions, good questions, demanding immediate answers. And poor Mike has to struggle to try to do that. And then whatever he says is pretty much typically then immediately dismissed as a non-answer. I don't think that is a way to have useful dialogue. And I'm just going to lay that out there. And I really hope not to see that repeated.
Chair Kelly, I will respond to that. We are all elected officials from our counties, and each one of us is very different in the way we approach things and our style and all that. I think Commissioner Banks does make some very good points. Perhaps it's her style that maybe you object to. But just like on the Board of Forestry, we have Board of Forestry members which are very direct, and others that are very laid back. We don't get to choose our elected officials. We don't get to choose our Board of Forestry members. So if you look at, to me, if you look at it in that type of a context, I don't see a whole lot of difference. I do understand your concerns. I do.
Well, fair enough. Fair enough, but I'm just saying I see it as a game of gotcha, and I don't think that benefits the conversation. We just don't need to operate on that level. It's like a TV show or something. And let's. I object.
Understand. Point taken.
I would hope that I have a chance to respond. I will be honest, I harbor a little bit of angst over some comments that were previously made in regards to your rural counties. I harbor a little bit of, I don't think that we have been given enough credit. There have been some comments regarding our inabilities to look at other types of economics outside of forestry. And to be very transparent, it felt insulting. It felt like it was insulting to 42,000 people that I represent. And so I'm struggling here just because this isn't a game of gotcha to me. I'm asking like really very real, very deep questions, very pointed questions that I would ask any panel who was in charge of such a large decision. And it's very serious to me. It is very serious to me. I know I make jokes about how many questions I have and how I always have another one, because I do. I always have another one. That's how my mind works. That's how I approach this topic, because I really feel like I'm trying to solve a math problem. And I know that there's got to be a right answer. And so I'll keep driving until I get that right answer. Now, to take that as an insult, I'm sorry that you feel that way. It's not meant to be given as an insult. It's not directed at anybody in particular. But these questions that I ask, they are very hard. Do I crack a few jokes every now and then again? Yeah, because I have to alleviate my own stress in that manner. This impacts my entire family, this decision. It impacts my children. It impacts my schools. I mean, I'm living on a 5th generation family tree farm. So it's a big deal. And I am a little defensive because I feel like I don't have a choice in what is getting ramrodded at us. And the people that live in my community don't have that choice. And so, yeah, I'm very
Commissioner,
serious about this.
Let me be clear. I'm not insulted. I object to the gotcha game, and we can agree to disagree. I'm done here, but I stand by what I said. I'm not insulted, but I don't think it gets us anywhere to operate on that level. So,
Thank you to both of you. Appreciate that very much. Anyone else have any last comments before we head into a weekend? A rainy, dreary weekend? Hearing none, time being 3:42 p.m. Let's adjourn this FTLAC meeting and hope everyone has a great weekend. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here.
Thanks, everyone.